Oh, thank you so much, Alexis. Thank you for that generous introduction. Yeah, we try to keep the attorney thing on the down low. But thank you so much. And thank you, Milda. Thank you for having me today. You know, we have been working for 25 years at raising money for DMOs, and we've been quite successful at it, raising over $2 billion for our clients. But it's so exciting today to not just be talking about our normal activities that we're raising money for, which are marketing and sales and events kinds of activities, but regenerative efforts, those things that add to sustainability and add to our destinations and make our destinations better places. So I'm really excited to be talking about that this morning. I did want to give a shout out to a few of my friends that have joined from the US. Sarah Tolliver from Visit Ogden, great to see you on here, as well as David Holder from Clarity of Place and Greg Oates, great to see you as well. So thank you all for joining, and thank you for tuning in to this presentation. I'll tell you, it is quite timely that we're talking about this. I don't know if you all saw, there was an article in the New York Times this morning titled "Venice, Overwhelmed by Tourists, Tries Tracking Them," and talks all about the cameras that Venice has put up to track their visitors, and talks about the new gates that they're going to be installing. Obviously, this is an important topic, and all of those things, whether you're doing those kinds of activities or messaging to your visitors or doing activities that actually help build back your organization and your destination, those all cost money. So let's talk about how DMOs are funded. We've done a great deal of research into this topic, and we divide DMO funding into two buckets. First, the private bucket, and you all should be quite familiar with this, partnerships and membership. In this era of COVID and recovery, we've seen significant grants, all different kinds of grants, from the national level to the state level to the local level. Certainly event revenue and contract services. One you might not be as familiar with is licensing. Some DMOs are actually looking at some of the assets they have in their destinations and licensing those assets and using that as a revenue source. But let's talk for a minute about the public bucket. The money's coming from the public sector. And again, grants is on this list. Certainly since the pandemic, that has taken on a whole new level of funding for our DMOs. But we also have something we called untethered tax allocations. And I think this is but based on the Now Group's recent tax study that they conducted in Europe, basically this is the primary funding source for most DMOs in Europe, essentially allocations from a government that are not linked to anything else. They are simply an allocation for tourism promotion or perhaps for sustainability kinds of activities, but it's money just coming from the government on a discretionary basis. One step beyond that, and what we see in the US quite a bit, are something we call tethered tax allocations. That is tax allocations that are tied to a specific tax, in this case, bed taxes. The Now study told us that only on average about 8% of DMO funding in Europe comes from bed taxes. That's not the case in the US. It is closer to 75% of the funding is actually a tethered tax allocation that's tethered to a specific bed tax. It's linked to that bed tax. Some portion of that bed tax is allocated to the DMO. Then we've got tax increment financing, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this today, but that's basically the concept of revenue sharing growth in some sort of tourism related tax, sharing that growth back with the DMO. So to say, this year, our taxes were 100 million. Next year, when they're 120 million, we're going to take some share of that 20 million and specifically allocate it back to the DMO. So it gives you a very specific skin in the game, gives you a very specific percentage that you will get based on the growth that you're able to achieve. And these kinds of mechanisms are becoming more and more popular. But today I really want to focus on the last, and it is this concept of assessments. And assessments are different than taxes. And if we were all together, I would ask the group, what's the difference between an assessment and a tax? And hopefully I would get the answer back, which is an assessment is based on benefit. So when a government levies a tax, essentially they collect the money and they can spend it as they would like. But special benefit assessments require, by their legal underpinnings, that we show benefit back to the payer. So when we levy an assessment, And if the payers are the hotels or other tourism businesses, we must show benefit back to them for that money. And what does that do for us? That creates a very stable, reliable source of dedicated money that can't be diverted for any other purpose. So we like to think, when we think about funding, we think about sufficiency on the one hand, that is, do you have enough money to accomplish the objectives that you need to accomplish, whether that's marketing your destination or providing additional regenerative type of activities. And then we talk about stability. How stable is the money? Can the money be changed by one vote of a local government? Can money be changed by one vote of a national government? Can that money be diverted for other purposes? And so when it comes to both sufficiency and stability, a tourism improvement district answers both of those questions because it provides supplemental funding over and above what you get now, and it provides very stable funding that, because of its legal underpinnings, can't be diverted for other purposes. And so essentially, this is an assessment on hotels and maybe other tourism businesses. It's collected by the local government, and then it's managed by the DMO. Creates a level playing field. There are no free riders. It's transparent. It's reliable. The businesses do have the option of passing it through to the guests, and more we're seeing these funds used not only for marketing and promotions, but regenerative projects as well as capital improvement projects. So really, this is a different way of thinking. And I know that in so many respects, Europe is ahead of the US in your regenerative efforts and your sustainability efforts. I think we have a lot in the US to learn from Europe. I think when it comes to these tax policies, there may be some things that you all could do to improve your financial situation by thinking in a little bit different paradigm. And the old paradigm of a tax is government imposed, no defined term, no requirement of benefiting those that are paying. And if you think about the new paradigm of a TID, this has a very specific term and a plan associated with it. The private sector is involved and engaged in this activity. It has legal accountability to make sure the funding gets spent the way that it was designed to be spent. And finally, it can't be diverted because it's based on benefit back to those businesses. If we look at globally, the statistics for TID, we are just shy of 200. We're at 191. The most recent one was Boston, Massachusetts. By the way, for Boston, that took their annual funding budget for the DMO in Boston from $8 million from pre-COVID numbers, and their projection after COVID with their TID in place is a total budget of $38 million, a $30 million delta based on the TID. So you can see a game changer, 5X, a game changer for the revenue that the DMO is getting. About half of these districts are levied on a percentage basis, and about half are levied based on a fixed rate per occupied room per night. So $1, $2, $3, like that. So on the low end, they're raising, in the smallest district, $10,000 a year, one hotel, very small district. On the high end, we have a statewide district in California that raises $120 million every single year for Visit California to do its activities across the state. We are in 18 states, and there are 3 of these districts in the UK as well. I wanted to mention we did, for the first time in 2021, you know, there's so many terrible things that have come out of the pandemic. There's a few good things that have come out of it. Well, the National TID Summit is one of those things that I think is a great thing that came out of COVID. Basically, we hosted a national summit to talk about TIDs. We had 375 people participate from all over the world, from countries on several different continents. And we had a great discussion about how people were raising money, what they're doing with that money, and what they intend to do in the future. And we plan to do that again in next year in 2022. Recently, a new study came out that I wanted to share with all of you. Tourism Economics, who has been a tremendous leader in the destination space, doing analysis and looking at return on investment for particular programs, did an analysis of tourism improvement district destinations versus non-tourism improvement district destinations. And they looked at 100 destinations over a 30-year period of time. So this was a very large statistical analysis looking at those programs they were doing that specifically drove ROI. And they asked the question, is there any difference between TID destinations and non-TID destinations as it relates to performance in the hotel industry in particular. And no surprises here. We found that yes, it does, right? If we give all of you more funding and you're doing more marketing and more sales activities, you in fact can move the needle when it comes to activities, generating more visitors, generating more activity. And they found an increase of 2.1% in room demand and a lift of 4.5% on room revenue every year for those destinations that had TIDs. And it simply is more resources flowing into these sorts of programs. So that's a little bit of a diversion. That's on the economic side, not on the regenerative side. But I wanted to mention that to you. That's relatively new data, and I wanted to share it with all of you today. A couple of other concepts about TIDs. They're extremely good at building partnerships. When you bring the private sector to the table, when they are investing in your destination and investing in your DMO activities, it gives them a completely different role than just simply sitting on a board and spending government money. So typically in a TID destination, we're creating new nonprofit corporations with boards that are representative of not only the community, but of the stakeholders and businesses in the destination. There is a forum for those stakeholders to participate in a very active way on the disbursement of those funds. And many of you may have boards like this, but TIDs really energize these efforts and really energize the efforts of the private sector because they feel like they have greater, I'll use that term again, skin in the game for the activities that you're providing. The other thing that TIDs really have started to focus on, and it's really exciting to us, is to put money into sustainability efforts, put money into regenerative efforts. And so this is a great use of these kinds of funds, and it can be used to fund improvements. It could be used to upgrade trail activities. It could be used to upgrade other facilities that you have. It could be used for special incentives or community-based events. We're seeing more and more of this. And what we're finding now that we didn't find in the past is more of our clients are asking, how do we raise money to do these kinds of programs? And let me give you a couple of examples. First, Monterey, we put a district together here, wonderful destination in California, began way back in 2006. They charge assessments on hotels. They vary it based on whether it is a full service or limited service hotel, but it is based on a fixed rate per occupied room per night. It ranges from $1 to $2.50 per occupied room per night. It raises about $4 million a year. And one of the things that Monterey does with this money is spend it on a program called Sustainable Moments Initiative. It's really dedicated to the website and marketing efforts to educate visitors and talk to them about how they can be responsible visitors. I know this is a topic you all have heard of and seen. It really is a way to make sure that the visitors are well informed, because sustainability and regeneration is something, is a culture in the Monterey community. This is extremely important to stakeholders, and they've said, we're going to take some of this dedicated funding that we have and put it in this direction. Another community I wanted to mention is Mammoth Lakes. And Mammoth Lakes began back in 2013. It actually not only assesses hotels, but it assesses restaurants, it assesses attractions, it assesses retail, all of that for the DMO. That $4.5 million comes back to the DMO. And one of the things they spend it on is regenerative efforts in Mammoth. And so again, this is a community that has a great focus on sustainability. And they've said, how can we encourage our visitors to be careful of our environment? And so they not only do that messaging, but they've also organized a cleanup event, New Trash Thursdays, essentially Thursday organizing the community and some of their visitors to go out and actually clean up trash in their destination. Some of you may be familiar with other kinds of events like this. One other that we thought was so interesting was this concept in the Faroe Islands called Closed for Maintenance. They would actually have times where their attractions would be closed, and the only way you could get into the attraction as a visitor was to sign up for maintenance duty. So if you come in, you can sign up for maintenance. You can then be in those attractions. You can give back as part of your travel. You can give back to the destination. And what a great idea this is for them. And what a wonderful thing for the destination. So that really concludes my affirmative presentation. There's so much more I could share with you, but I wanted to really pack it in. We are blessed to have just some wonderful clients, as you can see up on the screen here. And I feel very lucky to be involved with GDS and all of their good work. And I want to say thank you again for having me this morning.